There are many things involved in transforming a country, just as there are many things involved in transforming an individual life. And they're the same principles, because all that a country is a collection of people. Part of it, yes, does have to do with looking at your past, cleaning up what you need to clean up. So yes, this is why in my campaign, I stress the importance of reparative measures regarding both Black Americans and Native Americans. You simply can't have an abundant future if you're not willing to clean up the past. I want to be president because I want to help this country not only navigate these critical times, but put one chapter to bed and start a new one. And we can't really do that until we deal with both of those things. They both cause an underlying turbulence, and they cause an underlying amount of suffering that is unnecessary. So yes, I do believe that we need to deal with reparative measures towards both Blacks and Native Americans, but we need to do more than that as well.
Why is it so hard for the American people to embrace spirituality?
I don't think it's hard for the American people to embrace spirituality. We're spiritual people. Something like 9 out of 10 Americans say they believe in God. There are people who are religious in this country, people who consider themselves spiritual but not religious. There are people in the space of health and wellness. There are people who go to Alcoholics Anonymous, which is a spiritual program. There are people who go to psychotherapy, and whether they contextualize these things spiritually or secularly, they're talking about living a more loving and better life. I don't think the problem in any of this has to do with the American people. That's not where we have a problem. The American people are just fine. The problem is the gap that currently exists between the behavior of our government and the will of the people. And that's a crisis of our democracy, because the whole point of a democracy is that the government is an expression through representational government, representative government, of the will of the people. That system has been hijacked, however, by a preponderance of corporate money. So that too often, the issue is not why are the people not more spiritual. The problem is, why is the behavior of the government not more spiritual? The behavior of the government is not more loving, based on conscience, based on ethics, based on morality, based on doing the right thing. Why? Because of the donations that come from the very rich, particularly corporate. So, for instance, you might say, how could you sell a pesticide that we absolutely know does damage to the brain of a developing child? Well, I'll tell you how. Because Dow Chemical sells that pesticide and had a secret meeting in a hotel room with the current head of at that time the current head of the EPA, and these guys have been ex-chemical lobbyists and oil company lobbyists, and that's how it happens. This is not mysterious. The American people just need to wake up to not only how corrupt that is, but how dangerous that is. Not only to our democracy, but to literally the health and well-being of us and of our children and of people around the world and the planet itself. That's why it's so important now that the people step in. The conventional political establishment brought us here. The conventional political establishment needs to take the orders from the people now, and not the other way around.
And we got your press release about the new proposed Department of Peace that you would try to create if you were elected president. Tell me a little bit more. How will that work, the Department of Peace?
We need an integrative approach to politics, just like we have an integrative approach to medicine. We're aware now, you can't just take medicine, rely on medicine, you have to cultivate health. And we can't just have a national security agenda that is basically just endless preparation for war. We have to also cultivate peace. And right now, if you look at the resources, financial and otherwise, that we put towards military, compared to the financial resources and other focus that we put on peace building, you see that our focus on peace building is a fraction of our focus on military preparedness. And that does not have to do with legitimate security needs so much as it has to do with short-term profit maximization for defense contractors. This is what President Dwight Eisenhower called the military-industrial complex. Once again, corporate profits being the bottom line rather than any sense of wisdom. So with a Department of Peace, I want to beef up the peace-building measures within our State Department. This has to do with the USAID, which is humanitarian assistance, because we should see desperate people as a national security risk. Desperate people do desperate things. Desperate people are more vulnerable to ideological capture by genuinely psychotic forces. Look at what's happening in Guatemala. Look at what's happening in El Salvador. Look at what's happening in Honduras. This is an example of the kind of societal problems that emerge when people are desperate. Well, what were you doing letting them become so desperate? You know, if you're only dealing with symptoms and not dealing with cause, like what genius thought that was going to work? What genius in our international policy division didn't know that's going to become a problem? You see what I'm saying? So we have to look under the radar. Where are people desperate? Because where people, large groups of desperate people, if you want to cultivate peace and you want to cultivate financial prosperity, I'll tell you what you do. Help people thrive. Help people thrive. That's what you do. And that's what all my domestic and international policies will be built around. Now, in terms of the domestic issues of peace building, unfortunately, many of the same problems exist. We have millions of American children living in chronic trauma. We have areas called America's domestic war zones, where we're told that the PTSD of children is every bit as great as the PTSD of a returning veteran. Where's this country going to be in 10 years from now? Where's this country going to be 20 years from now if we're just letting this happen? We need restorative justice. We need conflict resolution. We need wraparound services for these children. We need anti-trauma. We need mindfulness in the schools. We have 13 million American children who are food insecure. We have children going to school in the richest country in the world, going to elementary school and asking the teacher if maybe they have some food that they could eat. We have millions of American children who are traumatized before preschool. And the conventional political establishment has just basically normalized their despair. Why? Because they're not old enough to work, so they have no financial leverage. How can they compete with the cloud of the corporate money that floods Washington and really runs things? And they're not old enough to vote, so they're not a constituency. But notice, they're full-on citizens of the United States, and even those who aren't, it shouldn't matter. I'm president, that kind of thing stops. That's why I want the U.S. Department of Children and Youth, and also that interfaces on a domestic level with the United States Department of Peace.
Thank you. One last question. On immigration, how will you fix all the problems happening in immigration right now?
The first thing we have to know is what is a problem and what isn't a problem. We have a president who has led millions of Americans to think that immigration itself is a problem. Immigration is not a problem. Immigration is a core value and a blessing on this country. All four of my grandparents came through Ellis Island escaping oppression. So let's be very clear here. What is your philosophical core value? The core value is give me your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. Unless we are descended from enslaved people from Africa or from Native Americans who were here for thousands of years before the white European settler even came, then who do we think any of us are? So, and the exchange is not unbalanced. Not only is coming to this country a blessing on the immigrant is a blessing on this country. That's part of the psychic bloodstream of this country. There's something powerful about people who come here hungry to make it, knowing what a blessing it is, not taking it for granted that they have the opportunity. This is where you see so much of the push for creativity and productivity among every immigrant group. So that's number one. And we also probably should remember that Ronald Reagan gave 8 million people amnesty. And he was a conservative Republican president. And in 1973, before 1973, if somebody was an undocumented worker, and I have a problem with even that phrase, nobody's undocumented in God's eyes, then all you had to do was go over to the registry and sign up. So that's where the problem really starts, is on the level of values. Now, in addition to that, there is a phenomenon called asylum. And that is not a crime. That is a statutory right. When you talk about what's going on in Honduras and Guatemala and El Salvador, the vast majority of people that we're talking about at this point are fleeing desperate circumstances. Now, we have refugee crises all over the world today, larger than any time that we've had since World War II. There are many ways in which we have to recognize, get it? Refugee crises, we've got a problem. This is not when you constrict, it's when you open. We take a fraction of the refugees that are coming from Syria, etc., compared to what other countries are, even though when you look at something like the war in Iraq and when you look at U.S. foreign policy in Latin America, the United States has not been who we should have been. And that is to say that our foreign policy has too often over the last few decades not been based on democratic or humanitarian values, but rather has been based on this same false God bottom line that we've acquiesced to domestically, which is short-term profits for huge multinational corporate entities. We obviously need more. Agents at the border. We need more openings at the border. We need more technology at the border. We definitely need the resources that will enable the vetting and the processing to be done in a legal and adequate way. There's no doubt about that. In terms of those who are here, the 11 million or so, what I will do as president, path to citizenship. Let's remember what I said before. I want to help this country end one chapter and begin another. So let's have a path to citizenship for everyone who has not committed a crime or transgressed in some way against a citizen of the United States. Other than that, what are we going to do? How long are we going to keep this torture going? Let's recognize when it is time to close the situation, fix the situation, and we're not going to fix the situation by just becoming a country that has no heart and that has no openness to the sufferers of the world.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.